Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the greatest rock and roll stories in the universe, all from the fans' perspective. It's Rock Stories with the Brummster. Now, here's the host of the show, my rockin' daddy, the Brummster.
Right on, the Brummster here. Rock Stories with the Brummster. They're rock stories from the fans' perspective. We pulled back that curtain, and of course, I've been in radio since, just 1996. And so throughout the years, I've had a chance to cross paths with many different friends in the radio universe. And you very well know that these artists, these awesome classic rock bands, these awesome rock bands, period, these awesome bands, period. I mean, I can't believe the amount of bands we've had privilege to go see and be a part of their entire experience. Mainly because we worked in this thing called radio. So throughout the years, I've met a lot of friends who've got these experiences, along with fans from the fans' perspective of their favorite concerts, bands, you name it. That's what the show's all about, pulling back that curtain so you have a bird's eye view of the behind the scenes rock stories. It's Rock Stories with the Brummster. Our podcast can be found at anchor.fm, at Spotify, and also Sundays at 11 a.m. You can check it out replayed at rockradio559.com. And I rock the rock afternoon drive every Friday, 5 to 7 Pacific Standard Time with the hard drive at 5 with the Brummster. But right here, we're a podcast, totally separate entity. Check it out. Also as well at Rock Stories with the Brummster YouTube channel. Okay, episode 4. I'm excited. I've looked up to this guy. I'm probably about 3 feet taller than, he's not even a short dude. I'm just a tall guy. But figuratively speaking, I have looked up to this guy since I got into radio, since 96. I'm buddies with my mentor, Kent Hopper. He was on episode 1. And I remember hearing stories about E. Curtis Johnson, the KRZR days, the Wild Hair. What amazing heritage for Fresno and the Central Valley and all of rock and roll. To have been a part of all of this rock and roll heritage that has flowed through the rock and roll veins here of California. And he's not even from California. But I met him while doing sales at the station he was working at that I mentioned, the Wild Hair. And I learned so much from this guy. So excited to have him on the program. E. Curtis Johnson with us to roll back that curtain a little bit, some behind the scenes stories from a radio legend's perspective. Welcome to the show, E. Glad to have you with us on Rock Stories with the Brummster, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You used some kind words. I do not consider myself a legend, but if somebody else wants to be deluded, have fun with it. Have fun with it. I like your premise of pulling back the curtain, although sometimes the things behind the curtain are really a mess, and it's not always what people imagine a radio station to be. I really loved WKRP in Cincinnati because it pulled back that curtain a little bit. And while that was a fictitious rock station, some of those episodes were based at things that actually happened at radio stations. And there are crazy things that used to happen at radio stations. I started when I was 16 years old. In a little town in northwestern Montana called Libby. It's not a very big place. It's a beautiful part of the world. They had one radio station, signed on the air at 6 in the morning, signed off at 10 o'clock at night because most people went to bed at 9. And it was from my early teenage years, I wanted to work there because I knew that they hired high school students. And I used to listen to far-off radio stations from the Pacific Northwest, mostly a station out of Vancouver, British Columbia, which was actually several hundred miles away, but it boomed in, called 14 CFUN, C-F-U-N. And I would listen to these great top 40 DJs in the mid-'70s, and I wanted to do what they were doing. And when I was 16, I applied at the little radio station in my hometown, and I got the job, and I was so excited. I just started my junior year in high school. I thought, oh, I'm on the radio. This is so cool. And then I found out the reason why I got the job was because I was the only one who applied. Wah, wah, wah. It's kind of when you're 16 years old and you think you're at the top of the world, and you realize, no, they hired me because I was just it. So, it's a little deflating, but nonetheless, I had the job. About my third day into the job, the program director came in and said, you know what, you really ought to say something. Because I was scared to death. I could barely open my mouth to give the legal ID at the top of the hour. But I eventually learned to talk and have a good time on the radio. But it was good training for things that I would encounter later in my career. And there were a cast of characters at this little radio station. For example, the program director, I won't mention his name. He also did the morning show. He only ever said two things to me. One was, you really ought to talk more. And two, about 3 weeks into the job, he came in while I was on the air and he says, stop playing so much soul music, which, I was playing some Earth, Wind and Fire, and some of the top 40 bands that leaned a little urban sounding. He didn't particularly like that. But those are the only two things he ever said to me. The station went off the air at 10 o'clock. But before we could go home, I had part of the job of being the afternoon guy, a night guy on this little tiny radio station, was you had to vacuum the floors at the radio station, and you had to make coffee for the morning guy, who was this program director.
Nice.
And that consisted of putting the coffee grounds in the little filter and making sure the back of the coffee pot was filled up. And then he was very particular about, he wanted the power cord right underneath the plug so that he could just run in the morning and plug it right in. One time, I think I had it about 3 inches to the left, and I got in trouble for that because it was too far from the plug. And we also had to take out all of the trash at the radio station. And the trash in the control room always had a Coors can in it, Coors beer, which was illegal. You cannot drink and be on the radio. But it really bothered me that, my boss was doing something that I thought was illegal, which actually was. I didn't mind taking out the garbage, but he was just kind of a jerk. And one night, about 2 months into the gig, as I'm putting the grounds in the back of the coffee filter, out of the corner of my eye, I catch the receptionist's desks down the hall. She had one of those old-fashioned school pencil sharpeners, and I got an idea. So I walked over to the pencil sharpener, pulled it off, took all of the grounds from all of the pencil shavings and the grinding. And I dumped it on top of the coffee grounds, closed the lid, turned off all the lights on the radio station, and went home. Well, then the next morning at 6 o'clock when I woke up, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. What have I done? I'm a 16-year-old kid when it really boils down to it. As it so happened, that was payday. And so I thought, oh man, I'm going to go in after school. They're going to fire me. My career's over before it ever even starts. So I kind of just mosey into the radio station, and everybody was greeting me as normal. Everybody said hi. Nobody said anything. I picked up my check to get ready to take it down to the bank, and the business manager's office was right next to the exit door. And as I'm walking past the exit, I hear the business manager say to the general manager, they were having a meeting in there, he says, hey, we really need to get a new coffee pot. That stuff's really starting to taste pretty rank. And that was the end of it. Nobody knew that I was the jerk that had dumped pencil grounds into this radio station.
It really is true. E. Curtis Johnson, radio legend. That's my opinion. There's no doubt about it. A lot of other people share it as well. Behind the scenes stories in radio and rock and roll. Rock Stories with the Brummster podcast. Oh my gosh, it really is true, E. There's a Seinfeld episode in like every single one of our lives. That could be an episode of Seinfeld, brother. Oh my gosh.
Well, here's another one at this little teeny radio station. The control room to your back and to the left, there was a production room behind it. It had a big glass window separating the two studios, and there was a toggle switch on the console, where if you pushed it up, it put the production room on the air, and if you pushed it down, it was a talkback speaker, so the two studios, could talk back and forth. Well, the one of the other disc jockeys at the radio station was trying to get my attention. He's waving at me, and I've been on the air maybe 2 weeks at this point. It's a Saturday afternoon, like 3:00 in the afternoon, and so. Instead of pushing the toggle switch down so that I could hear him, I pushed it up, which put him live on the air and overwrote the song. And to my horror, I heard him say, "Hey, you idiot, quit trying to sound so effing sexy." Except, he didn't say effing.
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, they went live on the radio, little conservative small town. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to get fired. And sure enough, 10 seconds later, the phone rings and it's the receptionist. And she's very polite. She goes, "Hey, did I just hear Jim tell you to quit trying to sound so effing sexy?" And I went, "Yeah, you did. Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't hearing things." And she hung up.
And that was it?
That is the only call I got. Nobody else heard it, which probably showed how many people were listening.
Right.
But, less than 2 months into my gig, I had committed, two terrible offenses that should have ended my career before it ever even started.
When God has a plan for you, E, right? Nothing can wreck God's plan, and God had a plan for you without a doubt. Your destination, eventually California. Behind the scenes, Rock Stories, E. Curtis Johnson, lifetime program director extraordinaire. Wild hair in the past as well, doing a great thing right now in Fresno. I'm excited to have you on the show sharing these behind-the-scenes stories, rock stories, radio stories. You're going to get a blend of it all here at the podcast, folks. Brummster here with you right now. California, how did you come from that environment out here to the rock and roll Central Valley? How did that happen, man?
Well, I came to Fresno by way of Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Diego, and Salt Lake City. When I moved out of Montana, I moved to the Bay Area and got a job at a smaller suburban station. Got a great morning job in the Ventura, Santa Barbara market, which took me to San Diego. Was on the air there for a few years. I really wanted to be a program director, and I knew if I stayed in San Diego, I would never be a program director. It was just, too much competition. It's a larger market.
Right.
But I got a program director's job in Salt Lake City, which was, a good-sized market. Worked there for a few years. But we wanted to come back to California. Most of my family was in California at that point. My wife's family was in California. So we took a job at KRZR to launch it and start it up. That was a lot of fun. 3 months. Oh, by the way, all of my radio friends said, do not go to work for Olympia Broadcasting. That was the name of the company that owned KRZR and several other radio stations across the country. They said, do not go to work for that company. They are in financial straits. Well, I ignored that. And before the first ratings book on KRZR even came out,
yes,
the company filed bankruptcy. It ended up being a blessing, and I'll have to I'll have to cut out a lot of things here just to get to the point. What ended up happening, what happened was all of the suits left. And for the most part, I was left alone at KRZR with very little oversight. And there were some things that I needed to do and did. And it worked out very well. We ended up, again, I'm condensing a lot of things. We put KKDJ out of business while we were still in bankruptcy. KKDJ was a great radio station, but they had never had any real competition before, and KRZR gave them some serious competition. They had KRZR on one side, and they had a classic rock station on the other, and we put the squeeze on them, and they ended up filing for bankruptcy. And it was a great opportunity to do real radio without a lot of corporate oversight, and we won. The ratings were excellent and stayed that way for a long, long time. But even there, I don't care what radio station you're at. There's always a control for, I don't want to say power, but there's always somebody who thinks that they need to make all of the decisions. Mm-hmm. And one of those types of people are consultants. I have worked with several consultants. I've actually been a consultant a couple of times. Consultants can be good because they can see things that somebody inside the radio station may not. The old expression, you can't see the forest through the trees. A good consultant will help you, see things that you don't. But a bad one is a control freak. And unfortunately, early in KRZR's tenure, we had a control freak. And he and I did not get along from the get-go.
Right.
And I'll tell you a brief story on that. Every week he would send out a list of songs. He had an approved list and his turkey list. And one week, at the top of the turkey list was a song called "Smells Like Teen Spirit" from a band called Nirvana.
Oh, wow. He did not sound like he was too wise, was he?
No, that was at the top of his list. Well, I had heard the song a couple of days before. Now, I did not know that Nirvana would be as big and as earth-shaking as they were, but I knew that song was a hit. And I told him I was going to add it. And he forbade me from adding that song. And he and I had several of these kinds of conversations in the past. And, we had these arguments before, but I just held to my ground. And I said, I don't care. I'm not going to use his real name. I'll call him Bob, but that's not his real name. I just says, Bob, you're wrong on this one. This song is a hit, and I'm going to add it. And then he did something that surprised me. He fired me over the phone.
Are you serious? Oh, my God.
And I said, well, you know what, Bob? We have a problem here. The problem is I'm also the acting general manager of the station right now, which means that I sign your check. You don't sign my check. So because I signed your check, no, I'm not fired. You, Bob, are fired.
Oh, my gosh. This is real, folks.
And of course, we all know what happened to Nirvana. They went on to have great success, brought a lot of other bands along with them. But there's always those kinds of power plays in place at a radio station. Right. Radio stations are full of passionate people, people who have strong opinions, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, and sometimes there's some real fights that happen. And there's a lot of pressure from outside. For example, I was banned by Van Halen's manager from having any promotional activity with Van Halen. I'm not going to mention the guy's name. He has since passed on. I'll call him Larry. That's not his real name.
Okay.
But Larry had another artist called Jude Cole. Jude was really kind of a AAA artist. kind of softer music. He sounded good. He was very professional, but he didn't belong on a rock station.
Right.
And Van Halen had an album out at the time, and this band's manager, Larry, would call me, and he would grind me on this artist named Jude Cole. And finally, I had just had enough of his badgering, and I said, I am not going to play Jude Cole. Jude Cole is death. KKDJ was a radio station that would have played Jude Cole, and they've been dead for 2 years now. Well, that offended him to no end, and he hung up the phone. And a few minutes later, I got a call from Warner Brothers Records, who said, what did you tell Larry? And I repeated the story, and they said, well, he's hopping mad at you. And there was a Van Halen tour at the time, and the radio station was banned from having anything to do with that particular tour, which I thought was kind of funny. But about 3 months later, unfortunately, the guy died. And I felt bad that, we were never able to patch things up.
Poor Larry.
I think in time, if Larry would have lived, he and I would have patched things, but we never got it back together. Although I had another great experience with Van Halen. They played the Selland Arena a couple of times. In fact, one of their albums they actually recorded at the Selland Arena, one of their live albums. But when Sammy Hagar was with them, they played the Selland Arena. And the mascot of KRZR was called the Wild Hair, play on words as in, having a wild hair up your butt. We did a lot of cool stuff with that mascot, but one of the things that wasn't cool was the actual mascot costume. Most mascot costumes are kind of bulbous and, balloony and kind of cartoony. But I wanted a hare is a lean, mean animal, and I didn't want it to look cartoonish. And so with the manufacturer who made the mascot costume, we made it really lean looking, which also meant that it was incredibly hot because there was no breathing room in it. So, and unfortunately, I was stupid enough to have the hair made to fit me. Well, I'm 6'2". We had these huge boots on the thing that had 3-inch heels. So 6'5", and then you add the head of the wild hair. It was probably another foot. So here's this 7.5 foot tall wild hair on the backstage area of the Selland Arena. We were outside, literally on the loading dock. We were doing a meet and greet with a couple of backstage winners and the members of Van Halen. So I'm back there waiting for the picture. It's about 105 degrees in Fresno that day. I am sweating like a pig and quite frankly, reeking like a locker room. The costume hadn't been cleaned in a while and it stunk. Well, out comes Alex Van Halen, the drummer. And I don't want to cast aspersions, but let's just say he was feeling no pain. I don't know what he was doing or drinking, but he was pretty high. And when he came out that back door and saw this 7.5 foot wild hair staring him in the face, he literally stepped back, and you could tell his mind was going, is this real, or am I hallucinating this? And just as he's trying to get it together, out comes Eddie Van Halen, and Eddie pretty much does the same thing. You could tell that in their mind it was like, does not compute. And they're both standing there for like a minute, just staring at me, trying to get a grip on reality. And then Sammy Hagar comes out, and Michael Anthony comes out, and all the rest of the people, and it kind of broke the tension. But I can truly say that I helped the two Van Halen brothers on the little trip that they happened to be happening at the time.
You were 100% the guide that afternoon for probably what was for them in their minds a 2-hour stop off, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Van Halen, behind the scenes, radio stories. We've all had that boss that just like, is this guy really my boss? And in radio, it's even more insane than that. I couldn't believe that they banned you, considering, I mean, that's that's biting the hand that feeds you. The radio's, whether he's got a personal problem with you or not, KRZR, the Wild Hair, was the rock station in the San Joaquin Valley at the time. No one touched it. So it was very, very profitable and very popular. I mean, talk about, biting the hand that feeds you, to ban you just because of a personal problem. How ridiculous.
Well, it happens. To be a band manager, you probably have to have a strong personality because, we all know the stories of crazy rock bands and the things that they do. Record companies are powerful entities. They can be difficult to deal with. So to be a band's manager, you're like a gasket. You're taking pressure from both sides. You're taking it from the label. You're taking it from the band itself and the record companies. So I don't blame the guy for having a strong opinion. And I probably should have tempered my comment a little bit, but nonetheless, those things happen. Okay. There are epic battles that oftentimes take place between radio stations, especially when there are two stations of a similar format in any given town. They're fighting for the image of the bands that come through, and sometimes dirty tricks are pulled. There's a lot of competition when a concert comes. There's another radio station that's still in existence. I will not mention their name because I think they're a crappy radio station. They've been around since 19...
And I worked there. I did afternoons for this station, so you don't have to say the name, and I won't either. But I think we're talking about...
No. I'm not talking about that radio station.
Okay.
I'm not talking about that radio station.
What station?
I'm talking about another one.
Okay. You don't.
Anyway,
have to say
my point is there are some epic street battles that go on between radio stations outside concerts, and to this day, I can truthfully say I have no idea how that radio station's van got towed away from the venue. I have no idea, and no one can also prove otherwise.
Right. And if you park in a place that says you'll get towed, then you can't go pointing fingers, right? It's very important.
Well,
also.
It wasn't.
What?
It was parked in a spot that was legally parked. You could legally park there.
Okay.
So I'm winking with my eyes here again. No one can prove that I had any knowledge over that stunt. That was also the night that another program director, because there were 3 radio stations at this concert, and one of the program directors cut the cord on a radio station's inflatable, which got the cops involved. And that one act by that other program director ruined all of the stunts and contests and fun things that used to happen outside concerts in Fresno. One guy blew it for everybody.
Really? So all of those rules changed because of this specific event? Wow.
Yep. Yeah. One guy from another radio station ruined it at concerts for all the radio stations in Fresno.
Interesting. Behind the scenes stories. You don't hear these anywhere else, especially through radio's perspective. Radio then, radio now, and radio's future. I don't mean to treat you like the ghost of past, present, and future like Christmas Carol here. But E. Curtis Johnson with us, Rock Stories with the Brummster. Past, present, future, radio, you know where it's been. We've talked about it today. Where is it now, and where is it headed, in your opinion?
Well, 95% of Americans still listen to a radio. There are also other choices, multiple streaming outlets. Radio competes with all kinds of internet things. Radio competes with TikTok and, apps. The competition's pretty brutal to some degree. It's death by 1,000 needles. But radio's not dead yet. Is radio as good as it used to be? No, it's not. It's not as good as it used to be because one, we don't make the money that we used to make. Advertising competition is pretty stiff. Most of the radio stations in America got bought by big companies who were more interested in profit margins than they were in producing a good sound coming out of a speaker. But by and large, I love radio still. I got away from it for 4 years. I never thought I was coming back, but I came back. And, while we may not have all of the whistles and bells, and while we may not have, some of the budgets that we used to have to do promotions, every day when I get up in the morning, I thank my maker that I get to go to a job that I love. I get to be a program director, and be on air at a radio station that I love working at, and I am extremely grateful for that.
And it's something that we hear through your voice and everything you produce, and not only what you've produced and done, E. Curtis Johnson, radio legend with us, Rock Stories with the Brummster, but also all of the people that you helped to produce. I look back, Ken Topper, Angie Good, some of the best program directors I ever had, that Charlie Wolf, that taught me real radio, not just all on the digital side where everything's automated, but back with the reel-to-reel when I started. And because I was able to learn from you pros, that's what made it great. And the personality I feel when I hear you on the air, it feels like it's back. It feels like it's there. But there's others like you who have also been shaped by what you've taught, because you haven't just managed a radio station. You've also led a lot of great people who have helped you across the finish line many times in your team effort at the radio stations that you've managed. So people, before we go, people, that's probably the thing that you love the most about your job, right? The folks that you've had a chance to partner with in radio. I know Chris Daniel, for example, the guy is a legend. And I heard him on KMJ. I haven't heard him in forever, but oh my God, like just Jen Lip, the people that you have, Brad Giza, the people that you have partnered with, the Reverend, I've worked with him, and Doug, the people that you have partnered with are just the most amazing cast of characters. And they have all been better, including myself working with you at KRZR in sales, for knowing you and working with you. Those people and what they have done beyond you is very gratifying, isn't it, as a manager, as a leader?
Yeah, I have been blessed with a lot of pros that I got to work with. I have learned from people, certainly. I was also fortunate to find a lot of young talent that were very moldable. I am proud of the fact that, a lot of the people still left on the air in Fresno are people that I got to work with. Some of them, I gave them their first job in radio, or I brought them to the market. I'm honored to have worked with all of them.
E. Curtis Johnson, radio legend, program director. In heaven, I think that they're going to give you a spot so you could program God's radio station and his radio group, without a doubt. You're going to do this into eternity. There's a reason why we love it so much, because we were made to do it just like a flower was made to bloom, right, E?
Well, I like the flower analogy. I'm not sure that heaven has a rock radio station, but I appreciate the compliment nonetheless.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Hang on the line for our engineers, E. Curtis Johnson. Thank you, sir. Rock Stories with the Brummster. E. Curtis Johnson, legend in radio and friend of the show. Thanks. So glad he was on the program today. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. Coming up next, more behind-the-scenes stories. Stay tuned. Rock Stories with the Brummster. Anchor.fm also as well. Spotify. And you can also check out Rock Stories with the Brummster YouTube channel. Go there, like and subscribe. And it airs every single Sunday online at 11 a.m. at rockradio559.com. All right, rock on, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Rock Stories with the Brummster. Stay tuned.